In this short video, I just wanted to introduce you briefly to water use efficiency. And then in the next couple of videos, we'll talk about a particular way of measuring water use efficiency that's particularly useful. So what is water use efficiency from a plant ecological standpoint? It's essentially the rate of growth of a plant relative to how much water it's using. And there's a few different ways to measure this, but for all of them, it gives us some information about the growth and water use strategies of plants. It's used a lot in crops, like crop breeding programs. So, they'll look at the water use efficiency of different lines and pick ones that are producing a lot of yield, but also are conserving water. And so that would be a high water use efficiency. We can look at competition between growth. So, if plants are using water at the same rate, but one of them is growing faster for the amount of water they're using, they might be more competitive in a particular environment. And then we can also look at changes in the physiology of plants over time. I just noticed that, and I'm not going to change it. And yeah, we'll talk about that one more in just a second, how we can get that. Okay, so just a few different ways of measuring water use efficiency. Maybe one of the best ways to do it would be to grow a plant in a pot, like is shown here in the picture on the left. And at the end of some experiment, some time, you would measure how much biomass was produced of that plant. And then if you monitored water use of that plant over its entire life, you would know how much water it used over its life. And so that would be integrating both the growth and water use over the entire lifetime of the plant. And so, on an individual plant, that would be the best way you could do it. But as you can imagine, it takes a lot of time and a lot of resources to be able to do that. So it's not done as commonly as other methods. One other way you could do something similar is in the field with weighing lysimeters. And so I thought I'd show you a few pictures of weighing lysimeters because I think it's a cool technology. There's not a lot of these around because they're super expensive and hard to keep running. But in this picture in the top left, you can kind of see this metal ring in the ground, and then, plants and soil inside it. And this diagram shows you what's actually below ground. And then you can see in this bottom right picture, this weighing lysimeter being pulled out of the ground. So basically it's a giant pot that you're growing, not just an individual plant, but, a small plant community. And then if you see, we've got this silver metal canister, so to speak, and then all of this stuff kind of here below it, that's a balance. It's just a giant balance. And so in the field, it can measure, evapotranspiration from that small community. So the downside of this one is it's measuring evapotranspiration, not just transpiration. But the nice thing is it's in the field and it's a little more realistic from a field perspective. And so that's another cool way to estimate water use efficiency. There is a weighing lysimeter at the shortgrass steppe, which is just northeast of town, that I don't think is used very much. Okay, another way that we can measure water use efficiency is just by measuring it with, measuring gas exchange with like a 6400 like we did in class. And so in this case, you would just take photosynthesis, so that's our growth rate, divided by transpiration, or stomatal conductance, and so that would represent water use. And so in this slide here, under the first bullet point, I have in parentheses seasonal. So measuring the biomass of a plant divided by how much water it used, this would be more like on a seasonal or a lifetime time scale of water use efficiency. Using a 6400 to measure water use efficiency, we call that instantaneous because you're getting a snapshot in time of what water use efficiency is. And it's interesting that sometimes these things don't relate, right? If you measure, instantaneous water use efficiency at a time that the plant's drought stressed or something, it might not really represent what its water use efficiency is throughout its lifetime. So there's trade-offs with each of these types of methods. Another way to measure it or estimate it is with carbon isotope ratios, and this is referred to as an integrated measure. And with carbon isotope ratios, we're going to talk about this method in the next couple of videos. So I don't want to get into it too much here, but we're measuring the carbon that's accumulated in the tissues of plants over time. And so this gives us another integrated measure of water use efficiency. There are some downsides to it. It can miss some information that's, for example, a seasonal pattern would provide. So it's maybe not quite as good as measuring like plant biomass and plant water use. The advantage is, though, especially in trees, that the carbon isotope ratios in a given year are recorded in the tree rings or the plant tissue, and allows you a way to go back in time and figure out how water use efficiency might have changed. So just one slide here to show one way that water use efficiency is used. And again, this is probably the way it's used the most. They use it a lot in agriculture. But this is on the x-axis here, you would have agricultural yield. And then on the y-axis, we have water use efficiency. And I probably would have reversed these axes. But what you can see is that with increasing water use efficiency, you tend to get an increase in yield, although there is some point that it starts to saturate. And so, yeah, I just point that out. I guess it's not super important for this discussion. All right, so next video we'll talk about carbon or isotopes in general a little bit, and then we'll talk about how to use carbon isotopes to estimate water use efficiency.